The Central District is a neighborhood in Seattle that is historically Black, historically African American. The majority of the land in this neighborhood was purchased by an affluent man of African heritage named William Gross. He purchased that land for people of African heritage to have places to live because they didn't really have any place to live where and work. And so the area has had some transition. For example, it was really heavily populated at one point by folks of African heritage. And then there were sections of the neighborhood that were heavily populated by folks of Jewish ancestry. And then we started to see a shift again back into African heritage Black folks in the neighborhood. And so it became, we affectionately call it the CD because it was originally called the Colored District. It was originally called the Coon District. Folks of European heritage called it the Coon District because it was populated by so many Black folks. And then that shifted to Colored District, shifted to Central District because we're pretty centrally located. Now it's often called the Central Area. Depending on where in the neighborhood you are, you can get to campus from the Central District in about a 20-minute walk. So we're really, really close to campus.
That it wasn't by accident that this neighborhood became the neighborhood where mostly folks of color lived, because of many of the policies, housing policies, neighborhood covenant policies that didn't allow for folks to move outside of that neighborhood, that was where most of the housing was available for people of color in the Seattle area. And for a number of decades that there were restrictions on where folks could live. There were structural issues, there were policies and laws that impacted who could choose where they wanted to live and who couldn't.
So at Washington Middle School, you can volunteer to be a mentor, so to work one-on-one with scholars. You can volunteer to work after school in our after-school programming, which again is more like 1 to 3. We also place SU students in classrooms, so you can volunteer to support a teacher in a classroom, maybe supporting one scholar who's really struggling in the class, or supporting a small group of scholars who are struggling or who are working a little bit ahead, and the teacher in the classroom is wanting to keep them engaged that way. You can also volunteer at our high school. We partner with Garfield High School, and the same opportunities apply there. You can volunteer at Bailey Gatzert, which is the elementary school that we work with. They have after-school programming, and they place students in classrooms during the day to support teachers as they support scholars. And then we have a plethora of community partners. We have partners in our Chinatown International District area. Folks can volunteer in community gardens. You can volunteer with agencies that serve folks experiencing homelessness on various degrees. There are projects to help small businesses in the area rewrite business plans or seek funding, so you can volunteer that way. We have other educational spaces in the area. So there are many, many ways to get involved and use your talents and your gifts in the neighborhood.
It depends on if you're registered in a course that has service learning as a part of the course. And in those situations, sometimes you can choose from a few options. In my course, students have 3 options, and we kind of sort folks based on interest and time availability and those sorts of things. The Center for Community Engagement has many volunteer opportunities, and so any of those you could choose on your own.
As an undergraduate studying, I had so many options, and through my classes and then personal decisions to volunteer or work in the community. The Center for Community Engagement can be the hub for that, and there's also other places on campus that you can get involved with the community.
The idea of gentrification is that an urban neighborhood begins to change. Who are the folks and who is able to live in that neighborhood? So for a long time, the Central District was the place where folks of color, specifically the Black community, their central hub was that area. And as housing prices increased in the Seattle area, that neighborhood became more attractive for folks from outside of that neighborhood to move into it. And so what it did is it increased the cost of housing, and it meant that folks that were living in their homes couldn't afford to continue to live there. The neighborhood was 70 to 80% African American. It's now at about 10 to 15%. So it was a major demographic shift. It's a major moving out of an entire community displaced from their home, from their roots. Every third house has been torn down and rebuilt. And so the house, it doesn't physically look the same as it used to, and the folks that live there are not the same as well.
Gentrification is a traumatic experience of colonization for a neighborhood and for an area. And it sucks the very life and soul out of a neighborhood, out of an area. It robs the area of history, which then means it robs the inhabitants of that neighborhood of history. It denounces, strips away, demoralizes, it dehumanizes. It takes away a sense of home. It takes away a sense of belonging. It says you are not valuable. The way you do things and the way you interact is not valuable. So gentrification, colonization really says you are not valuable, and where you live is not valuable or worthy until someone else deems it so. And so it really is a traumatic experience that requires a lot of healing. Any folks who grew up in the Central District often no longer feel safe in the area because folks are calling the police on them for simply walking in a neighborhood that they grew up in, that their families had been in since the 1930s, 40s, 50s. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't bring opportunity. It doesn't mean that it doesn't bring growth. The question is at what cost and at whose expense, and who was worthy enough for that to happen. We really are asking folks to come into the community and come into spaces with this attitude of, I'm not here to fix. The neighborhood's not broken. Its residents aren't broken. If you're coming in to fix, you're coming in with the deficit mindset. And so there is racial equity training that happens there at your site. You will often be exposed to some training on operating from a culturally relevant space and really thinking about what your own personal identities are and how they show up in the spaces in which you're working and which you're serving, and really holding what does that mean when I'm working with scholars or adults with differing identities, and how does that impact? So there's some initial training, and then there's some ongoing training that happens.
So in my course, we learn about the history of the neighborhood. Each student group, for example, the group of students that was working at Washington Middle School, they learned specifically about the history of the school, where it's been, why it's located where it is, what can they learn about the demographics of the school from the Seattle Public School website. So they walk around the area around the school and pay attention to the different kinds of assets that are in the neighborhood, and we divide those into kind of different categories to just get a sense of what and where is this place, so that I'm not walking in with no knowledge. The way that I think about community engagement and how I differentiate it from community service is that community service often has a "I'm going to help you" type attitude, that I have something and you need something. And so my service to you in the community is I'm giving you something. How I would differentiate that from community engagement, first, is the attitude that LaKesha and I both talked about around working with and not for the community. And so being engaged in the community is active. It is working with, not working for. There's an element of collaboration that can happen either from the community partner and the faculty and the student and the community partner and the scholars at the school and the students. But the ultimate goal can be creating more just relationships in our community.
And it's a partnership. When we really think about partnership and think about developing relationship, what it means to invest of yourself. And just by that sheer, sincere, authentic investment of yourself and partnering with the community, there is one of the components of cultural humility is mutually beneficial relationships. And part of that means, how are we challenging each other? How are we helping each other heal? How are we nurturing?
You know, the community engagement hours, you will find that you have coursework that requires service learning. And so by completing the course and do the service learning, that gets you closer to finishing your degree. There are also opportunities in many majors to do an internship experience, which is, depending on the degree, can be either a requirement or an elective option in your degree program. And so by completing internship hours, which is kind of a subset of community engagement, that's another way to have experience in the community and to get credit for it. And that would be something that an advisor in your area, in your major area, could give you more specific information about.
When you're coming through the Center for Community Engagement, you, in the fall, depending on what fall looks like, you may see a lot of online things, opportunities for virtual meet and greets. There are lots of opportunities posted on the Center for Community Engagement's website. It depends on the site that you're going to. Some sites do want to do an interview with volunteers to learn about what your skill set is, what areas you're interested in serving, and then just to learn a little bit about like what your schedule's like, how much time you are wanting to give of yourself. So CCE, the Center for Community Engagement, if you're going through our office, you will typically fill out an online form just so that we can make sure we know where you're serving and invite you to lots of really fun events that we throw for the folks who are serving in our community.
In course-based service learning, there isn't really an application process, that the faculty member has done all the legwork ahead of time, so that then you get placed in one of the options that the faculty member has set up. And often an organization is going to be pretty specific about what they're hoping for as far as time commitment or number of hours. And so that's another way that you kind of make sure, is this a good fit on both sides? Because if they, you know, when you're working with youth, it does not work well for the youth to have new volunteers keep coming in every quarter, that's hard for students to build relationships and see those folks go, mostly because it is to make that experience mutually beneficial between the college student and the organization or the community partner.
I have seen a lot of impact. Students, SU students, feeling more grounded in who they are as people, feeling more connected to the identities they hold, which is beneficial for them and for any future partnering and service that they're going to do. I have had a number of folks say that they now feel more driven to do what it is, to work in the area that they are majoring in, or now they know how their major will align with their future work, or hope that it aligns with their future work. I've had students share that they have been more connected with their peers, with their family through working during service work in the community, through being engaged in the communities. I think one thing Becky has spoken to is it's deepened the learning. It's made it more real for students. It's made it more tangible sometimes for students. Because they're able to apply things that they're learning in class to real life situations.
Doing community engagement is one of the opportunities that you will have, especially when you're coming in as a new student, to feel connected to something. And that feeling connected to something will help you as you continue to move along on your majors. I have seen in my students is they feel more connected to the university and to the community around the university. And so that has been a benefit for them. I think they learned more skills. I think they, again, as LaKesha said, they get more clarity about what they want to do after graduation. You get to put things like this on your resume. And so it also helps with your looking for employment while you're a student, applying for scholarships while you're a student, as well as post-graduation. Good luck with the rest of this year, and we hope forward to see you on campus next year.